The morning began like any other for Daniel, the quiet farmer who lived miles away from the nearest town. His farm was large, stretching across open fields, with tall grass that moved gently with the early wind. The sun had barely risen, only a thin golden line touching the horizon, and he liked to start his day before the world fully woke up. He walked with slow, steady steps, holding his old metal bucket and whistling softly to himself. Everything felt peaceful, normal, and predictable. That was exactly how he liked his days to be. As he walked past the barn, he heard a sound that did not belong to the morning. It was not the wind, not the call of a bird, not even the creak of an old wooden board. It was a voice soft, weak, and trembling. Daniel stopped. The bucket in his hand lowered slowly. He listened more carefully. At first, he thought he imagined it. But then he heard it again. A faint cry hidden behind the barn, like someone trying to call out but barely able to breathe. His heart began to beat faster. On a farm, you hear many sounds, but not a human voice calling out for help. He placed the bucket on the ground and walked toward the back of the barn, his boots crunching on the dry earth. With every step he took, the voice became slightly clearer. It was a woman's voice, but it sounded tired, almost fading away. When he turned the corner, he froze. Lying on the ground, half covered in dirt and dry leaves, was a young woman. Her clothes were torn in several places, her hair tangled, and her face pale, as if she had not eaten or slept properly in days. She looked like she had walked through miles of struggle before collapsing here. Daniel had seen injured animals, sick travelers, lost children, but he had never seen anyone look this broken and fragile. He stepped closer, gently, so he wouldn't startle her. "Miss." Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment they looked empty, like she was not sure if she was seeing a real person or imagining one. Then she whispered something so soft, he had to kneel down to understand. He leaned closer, and she repeated it, her voice shaking as if speaking cost her great effort. "Please." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He blinked, unsure if he heard her correctly. She looked up at him with eyes filled with desperation, pain, and something that looked like complete hopelessness. She truly believed she had reached the end, that there was nothing left for her. His voice cracked a little as he answered, "No, no, I can't do that." It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was a gentle refusal, spoken from a place deep inside him. He never hurt people. He couldn't even harm a struggling animal, unless there was absolutely no other choice. And this young woman was still alive. She was breathing, talking, and begging only because she thought no other help would come. Her lips trembled. Tears formed at the corners of her eyes, though she seemed too tired even to cry properly. "Please, I don't want to feel this anymore," she whispered. "It hurts. Everywhere." Daniel felt something heavy settle on his chest. He knew pain, physical pain from hard work, and emotional pain from losing people in life. But the pain in her voice was different. It was the kind that came from fear, exhaustion, loneliness, and the belief that you had no place left in the world. He shook his head again. "I won't do that," he said, his voice steady this time. She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't believe him. Maybe she didn't even understand. Her eyes slowly closed again, her body relaxing only because she had no strength left to hold herself up. Daniel gently reached under her arms and lifted her as carefully as he could. She was shockingly light, like someone who had not eaten properly for too long. Her head rested weakly against his shoulder as he stood up with her in his arms. His house was not far, but the walk felt longer than ever. He looked down at her face now and then, to make sure she was still breathing. Each time he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest, he felt a small relief. When he finally reached his front porch, he pushed the door open with his foot and stepped inside. The house was simple wooden floors, plain furniture. Nothing fancy. But it was warm, clean, and safe. And right now, that was what mattered. He carried her to the spare room he kept for visitors, though he had not had any in months. Carefully, he laid her on the bed. Her breath was slow, uneven. She still trembled from weakness. Daniel quickly brought a blanket and covered her gently. Then he filled a glass with water and set it on the table beside the bed. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her, wondering what had happened to make her reach such a hopeless point that she asked a stranger to end her pain. Who was she? Where did she come from? What had she gone through? But those questions could wait. Right now, she needed help, not questions. He walked to the kitchen and warmed some broth over the stove. When it was ready, he returned and sat at the edge of the bed. He touched her shoulder gently. "Try to drink a little," he whispered. Her eyes opened halfway. She seemed confused, like she couldn't understand why someone was being kind to her. With slow movements, she tried to sit up. Daniel helped her, placing a pillow behind her back. He lifted the bowl toward her, and she took a small sip. Then another. After a few moments, she whispered, "Why? Why are you helping me?" Daniel didn't need to think. "Because you're hurt," he said simply, "and no one deserves to suffer alone." The answer made her eyes water again. She took another sip. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept trying. After a few minutes, she whispered her name. Maya. It was the first time he had heard it. A small name, a gentle name, but it carried heavy weight in the way she said it. As if even her own identity had been through hardship. He told her his name, too, though she only nodded weakly. He could see she was fading into sleep again. When her eyes finally closed, he placed the bowl down, pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders, and quietly stepped out of the room. Daniel stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door. He took a deep breath, letting the reality settle in. Someone had abandoned this young woman. Someone had left her to suffer alone. Someone had broken her down so much that she believed there was no help left in this world. But she had reached his farm. She had asked him for something he could never do. But she had also given him a silent responsibility. He would not let her fade away. He walked to the kitchen to prepare more supplies, fresh water, medicine, clean cloth. He didn't know all the answers. But he knew one thing. Maya was safe now. And as long as she was under his roof, she would not face pain alone again. Outside, the sun was rising higher, filling the farm with light. But inside the house, a new kind of hope was quietly beginning, even if neither of them fully understood it yet. Daniel looked toward the spare room again, and in that moment, he made a silent promise. He refused her desperate request, but he would end her pain his own way by helping her live again. Maya woke up slowly, as if her mind was fighting to rise out of a deep, heavy darkness. At first, she didn't know where she was. She saw a ceiling she did not recognize, heard the faint clucking of chickens from outside, and smelled something warm soup or bread coming from another room. Her eyes blinked several times, adjusting to the light. For a moment, she panicked. Her fingers gripped the blanket tightly as her breathing turned fast and shaky. She didn't know if she was safe or if someone had moved her while she was unconscious. Then she heard soft footsteps approaching. Not fast or loud, but slow, careful, almost respectful. Daniel stepped into the room, carrying a cup of warm tea in his hand. When he saw her awake, he smiled gently, the kind of smile that didn't ask for attention, but offered comfort. "You're awake," he said softly. Maya tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Daniel quickly set the cup down and helped raise her pillow so she could lean against it. She felt embarrassed at how helpless she was, but he didn't make her feel uncomfortable. He moved with quiet patience, as if he had all the time in the world. You're safe here, he added, seeing the fear in her eyes before she could hide it. She swallowed hard. Her voice came out small. Where am I? My farm, he said simply. You collapsed behind my barn. I brought you inside. Maya lowered her gaze, ashamed. She remembered asking him for something terrible. She remembered her desperate words, spoken when she believed no one would help her. Now she couldn't even look at him properly. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel shook his head. There's nothing to apologize for. You were hurting. Anyone could see that. Her eyes stung, but she held back the tears. She didn't want to cry again. She had cried too much already in the last few months. She looked around the room instead. It was small, but clean, with a wooden dresser, a window that let in soft morning light, and a warm blanket covering her legs. It felt safe, something she had not felt for a long time. Daniel picked up the cup and held it out to her. It's just warm tea. Helps the body calm down. Her hands shook as she took it. He noticed and steadied the cup with his hand gently placed beneath hers. She took a small sip. The warmth spread through her chest, easing the tight knot that had been sitting there since she woke up. Do you remember anything? Daniel asked, his voice soft. She nodded slowly. I remember walking for hours. Then everything became blurry. He waited quietly, letting her speak at her own pace. She hesitated, then whispered, Why did you help me? Daniel looked surprised by the question. Because you needed help. But you don't know me. You don't know what happened, who I am, or why I was out there. She stared at the tea, ashamed of the tears forming again. People don't usually help someone like me. Daniel sat down on the wooden chair beside the bed. Maybe not everyone does. But I'm not everyone. She took another sip of tea. Her throat relaxed a little, and she felt a tiny bit of strength return to her voice. My name is Maya, she said quietly. I thought I was going to die out there. Daniel nodded. You almost did. But you're here now. Rest. Eat. You'll get better. His calm tone made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Trust. She looked up at him again. I didn't mean what I asked earlier, she said, her voice trembling. I was tired, lost, in pain. I didn't think anyone would care. Daniel didn't flinch. I understood. Pain can make people say things they don't truly want. But you're safe now. That part of your suffering is over. For a long moment, Maya just sat there, staring at him. She had never seen someone so gentle in their strength, so steady, so firm in refusing something terrible, yet so soft in offering comfort. When Daniel stood up to leave the room, she spoke again, her voice small. Thank you. He nodded once, not wanting to overwhelm her with too many words. When he left, Maya looked around again. She noticed clean clothes folded on a chair near the bed. There was a small bowl of fruit on the table beside her. The window was open just enough to let fresh air in, but not enough to make her cold. Everything had been done with care. Her eyes filled with tears. But these tears were different. Not tears of fear, but relief. Later in the afternoon, Daniel returned with a bowl of warm vegetable soup. When he entered the room, Maya straightened a little and wiped her face quickly. She didn't want to appear weak, though her body still felt fragile. You should try to eat a little, he said gently. She nodded. He helped her sit up again, and she took the first spoonful. The soup was warm, soft, and simple, just like the feeling she got from being in his house. After she ate a few bites, she felt stronger. She took a deep breath and finally found the courage to share a little more. I didn't grow up around here, she said. I was working on a farm far away from this place. At first, everything seemed fine. But later, things changed. Daniel listened without interrupting. The people I worked for, they didn't treat me well. They pushed me too hard. When I got sick or hurt, they ignored it. And one day, they told me to leave. Just like that. No money, no food, no help. They said I was too much trouble. She clenched the blanket in her hands, her voice breaking. So I walked. And walked. I didn't know where I was going. I thought I could find a town, but I got lost in the countryside. I got weaker every hour. Finally, I just collapsed. Daniel felt anger rise inside him, not at her, but at the cruelty she had faced. He looked at her with gentle eyes, but a firm voice. "You didn't deserve that," he said. "No one deserves to be thrown out when they're hurting." Maya lowered her head. "I thought the world didn't want me anymore. That's why I said what I said when you found me." Daniel leaned forward slightly, so she would hear every word. "You were wrong about that. Your life still matters. You were just in the wrong place, with the wrong people. But you're not alone now." His words entered her heart like a warm light in a dark room. For the first time in months, Maya felt hope small, fragile, but real. As the day went on, she slept, woke, ate a little more, and slept again. Daniel checked on her often, always quietly, always respectfully. He didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. He didn't rush her. He didn't treat her like a burden. In the evening, she gathered enough courage to ask, "How long can I stay here?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "As long as you need to get back on your feet." Her lips trembled again. "Why are you so kind to me?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck shyly. "I don't know. Maybe because the world needs more kindness, not less." Maya looked at him for a long moment. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. The relief in her eyes said, "Enough." That night, when she finally fell asleep again, her breathing was calmer. Her body no longer shook with fear. The darkness she had been drowning in felt a little less heavy. And in the quiet of the hallway, Daniel stood by the door, watching her rest peacefully. He didn't know everything about her past, but he knew one thing with certainty. She came to his land at the lowest moment of her life. He refused the desperate request she made, but he would give her something far greater. A chance to heal, a chance to feel safe, a chance to begin again. The next morning began quietly, with a soft, golden light filling the spare room. Maya opened her eyes slowly, feeling a little more rested than the day before. Her body still felt weak, but there was a slight strength returning to her muscles, a small but hopeful sign. She listened carefully and heard Daniel moving around in the kitchen. Pots clinked softly, water poured, something simmered on the stove. There was a peaceful rhythm in his actions. She sat up slowly, holding the blanket around her shoulders. Her legs still trembled, but she felt more awake. For the first time in many days, she didn't wake up scared or lost. Instead, she woke up knowing she was safe. That feeling was new, and it took her a moment to accept it. Daniel knocked lightly on the door before entering. When she looked up, he smiled the same gentle smile that made her feel calm. He was holding a tray with breakfast warm porridge, a slice of bread, and a small bowl of fruit. "You're early today," he said softly. "How do you feel?" "A little better," she whispered. He placed the tray on the table and helped her adjust her pillows again. He moved slowly, making sure she was comfortable. When she lifted the spoon to eat, he noticed her hand was steadier than yesterday. "That's good to see," he said quietly. Maya took a small bite of porridge. It tasted warm and comforting. After a few minutes, she looked at Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "I didn't think I would ever feel safe again," she said. Daniel sat down on the chair near her bed. "Healing takes time, but you're already stronger than you think." She lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond to kindness like this. She wasn't used to it. For the next hour, Daniel stayed nearby as she finished eating. He didn't pressure her to talk, but his calm presence filled the room with a quiet reassurance. Later in the day, Maya wanted to stand for the first time. Daniel came to support her. She placed her feet on the floor, feeling the cool wood beneath her. Her legs shook immediately, and she grabbed his arm to steady herself. "Easy," he said gently. "One step at a time." She nodded and leaned on him as they took a slow, careful walk from the bed to the window. The fresh morning air touched her face, and the sight of the fields outside felt almost unreal. The open land stretched far in every direction, filled with soft green grass, a few trees, and the gentle movement of animals in the distance. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "This land keeps a person grounded." Maya's voice softened. "I haven't seen anything peaceful like this in so long." They stood there near the window for a while, letting the quiet calm her nerves. That short walk tired her out quickly, and Daniel helped her back to the bed. But the effort made her smile. It was a small victory. By afternoon, Daniel was outside working on the fields, but he checked on her every hour. Sometimes he brought water, sometimes just looked through the door to make sure she was sleeping peacefully. Maya noticed these small acts of care, and every one of them touched her heart. When evening approached, her fever suddenly returned. It started with a small shiver. Then her skin felt cold and hot at the same time. Her face became pale, and her hands trembled. Daniel stepped into the room just as she tried to call his name. "Maya?" His voice sharpened with concern. I don't feel right," she whispered, her voice thin and weak. Daniel hurried to her side. He felt her forehead and realized she was burning with fever. He immediately fetched a cool cloth and placed it on her head. He sat beside her, worry in his eyes. "This might happen," he said softly. "Your body is still recovering. You're not out of danger yet." Maya tried to stay awake, but the fever pulled her into a half-dreaming state. She heard Daniel's voice faintly, as if from far away. She felt him change the cloth again and again, keeping her temperature under control. He stayed by her side for hours, refusing to leave the room. At one point, Maya opened her eyes slightly and saw him sitting beside her. His shoulders tired but his face full of determination. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Daniel noticed her struggling and held a cup of water to her lips. She took a few small sips, and he whispered, "You're doing fine. Just breathe." The night was long. Maya drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she woke, Daniel was still there, changing the cloth, giving her small sips of water, whispering calm words to keep her from panicking. Around midnight, Daniel quietly left the room for a moment and returned with someone else, a local nurse he trusted. She was a kind, older woman who walked inside with a gentle smile. "Maya, this is Nurse Helen," Daniel said softly. "She's here to check on you." Helen examined Maya carefully, speaking with a soothing voice. She explained that the fever was a sign of exhaustion, dehydration, and the emotional strain Maya had been carrying for so long. With proper rest and care, she would recover. Before leaving, Helen spoke quietly to Daniel in the hallway, but Maya could hear bits of their conversation. "She is emotionally fragile," the nurse said. "She needs calm, patience, and stability. Don't leave her alone for long. And talk to her gently. Trust takes time." Daniel nodded. "She'll have all of that here." When he returned to the room, Maya looked at him weakly. Daniel shook his head firmly. "You're not trouble. You're a human being who's been through too much. Helping you is not a burden. It's the right thing to do." Her eyes softened with emotion. She wanted to cry, but she didn't have the strength. Instead, she closed her eyes again, feeling safe despite the fever. By dawn, her temperature finally began to drop. Daniel did not sleep the entire night. When Maya opened her eyes in the morning, she saw him sitting in the same chair, half asleep, his head resting on his hand. She spoke softly, "Daniel, He opened his eyes immediately. "You're awake?" She nodded weakly. "Thank you for staying." He gave a small, warm smile. "I wasn't going anywhere." For the next few days, Maya slowly recovered. The fever came and went, but each time Daniel was there. He brought fresh soup, warm water for washing, soft blankets, and comforting words. He never let her feel alone. As she got better, she started helping with small things around the house, folding sheets, arranging the table, cleaning small corners. She insisted on doing these tasks. "I want to help," she said shyly. "I don't want to just lie around." Daniel didn't argue. He smiled and let her do small things that didn't strain her. Every evening, she sat on the porch with him, watching the sun set across the fields. They talked about simple things: nature, weather, old memories, and sometimes nothing at all. These quiet moments helped Maya heal not just her body but her heart. One evening, when the sky was turning orange and pink, she spoke softly. "Daniel, I want to tell you something. Something I haven't told anyone." He turned to her slowly. "You can tell me. Only if you're ready." She took a shaky breath. "When I was walking through the empty roads, when I was hungry, tired, and hurting, I thought I had no value left. I thought people would always turn their back on me. That's why I said what I said when you found me. I didn't see any future." Daniel listened carefully, not interrupting. "But you didn't give up on me," she continued. "You refused what I asked. You didn't leave me behind. You didn't treat me like I was nothing. You gave me food, water, safety, and hope." Her voice trembled. "You gave me a chance to live again." Daniel looked at her with quiet sincerity. "Everyone deserves a chance. You just needed someone to stand beside you." Maya wiped her tears gently. "I want to get better. Not just physically, but inside. I want to feel human again." Daniel nodded. "You will. One step at a time." As she looked out at the fading light, Maya realized that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Her heart felt lighter. She wasn't completely healed yet. And Daniel's steady support was the reason she could finally see a path forward. The days slowly turned into weeks, and Maya grew stronger each day. Her steps became steadier, her voice clearer, and her eyes brighter. The fear that once filled her slowly faded away, replaced by a quiet confidence she didn't know she still had. Daniel noticed all the small changes: the way she stood taller, the way she walked with purpose, and the way she no longer avoided looking at her own reflection in the window. One morning, she woke before Daniel for the first time. The sky outside was a pale blue, with a soft breeze carrying the smell of fresh grass. She stepped out onto the porch slowly, leaning on the wooden railing as she watched the sun rise. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply breathe. The farm felt peaceful, almost like a different world, far away from the pain she had known. Daniel found her there when he stepped outside, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He smiled when he saw her standing calmly in the morning light. "You're up early," he said gently. Maya turned and returned his smile. "I felt like watching the sunrise. It's beautiful." Daniel nodded. "It always is, but it seems more meaningful when someone appreciates it." She looked back at the horizon. "I couldn't have imagined a moment like this before." "Life changes," Daniel replied softly. "Sometimes faster than we expect." Maya didn't say anything, but her heart felt warm. She knew he was right. As the morning went on, she helped Daniel with small chores: feeding the chickens, wiping down the porch, cutting vegetables for lunch. She tried not to push herself too hard, and Daniel kept watching her to make sure she wasn't straining. They worked quietly, sometimes sharing a little conversation, sometimes just enjoying the stillness around them. Around midday, they walked to town so Maya could speak with a few people about finding simple work. It wasn't easy for her to step into town again, surrounded by strangers, But Daniel stayed beside her the whole way. His steady presence gave her courage. People stared at her curiously at first. They had heard small whispers about the girl Daniel rescued from behind his barn. But most didn't know the full story. And the few things they did know were enough to fill the air with quiet speculation. But instead of fear or judgment, Maya found something surprising: kindness. One older woman approached her outside the general store. "You must be the young lady Daniel helped," she said warmly. "We've heard you've been through a lot. I'm glad you're walking again." Maya felt shy but grateful. "Thank you. I'm still trying to get back on my feet." The woman smiled. "And you will. Daniel has always been a good man. You're in safe hands." Daniel looked away, embarrassed by the praise, and Maya smiled softly. They spent part of the afternoon meeting people who offered small tasks, sorting mail, helping at a local shop, maybe cleaning houses on certain days. Maya didn't accept anything yet. She simply wanted to understand what was possible. She didn't want to rush. She wanted to make sure she was strong enough, first. On the walk back to the farm, Maya walked a little ahead of Daniel. She felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope for a future. A future where she could stand on her own and not live in fear. When they reached the farm, Maya walked into the kitchen and began preparing tea. Daniel watched her with quiet appreciation. She had grown so much since the day he found her collapsed and hopeless behind the barn. It was like watching someone come back to life piece by piece. As they sat at the table, Maya finally spoke the thoughts she had been carrying. "Daniel, I want to rebuild my life," she said softly. "I want to try living again. I want to work, help others, and feel normal. And I want to leave behind the pain I came with." Daniel nodded. "You're strong enough to do that now?" Maya's eyes softened. "I'm strong because you believed in me." Daniel didn't respond for a moment. He looked out toward the fields, gathering his thoughts. "You did the hard part," he finally said. "I just gave you a place to heal." "That was everything," she whispered. Silence settled over them, comfortable, gentle. Maya looked down at her hands and realized they no longer shook the way they did when she first arrived. She felt grounded, steady. Later that evening, as the sun began to set and painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, Maya walked outside to the porch again. Daniel joined her, leaning on the railing beside her. "Town was kind to you today," Daniel said. Maya nodded. "Yes, it felt good to talk to people again." "Do you think you'll take one of the jobs?" "Maybe," she said with a small smile. "I don't want to rush, but I want to have a purpose again." Daniel nodded approvingly. "Whatever you decide, I'll help you." She looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "I know." A quiet, peaceful moment passed between them. The sound of the wind moving through the fields created a soft background hum. Maya felt something inside her settle, like a weight she had carried for too long was finally being lifted. She took a deep breath. "Daniel, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When I first came here, when you found me, I truly believed there was nothing left for me. I was sure the world would never show me kindness again. I thought maybe it would be better if I disappeared quietly." Daniel's face softened with deep care. "But what you did," Maya continued, her voice trembling slightly, "changed everything. You refused the thing I asked, because you knew it wasn't truly what I wanted. And then you helped me stand again. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't push me. You didn't judge me. You just helped me live." Daniel's voice came out low and calm. "That's what any decent person should do." Maya shook her head. "Not everyone does. Not everyone even tries." Daniel sighed softly. "Maybe. But I'm glad you reached my farm that day." Maya looked out into the open fields. "You didn't just save my life, Daniel. You saved who I am. You gave me back my future." 1. Daniel didn't speak, but the quiet emotion in his eyes said he understood. A few days later, the town invited Daniel and Maya to a small gathering. Word had spread about the young woman he had rescued, and people wanted to show their support. Maya felt nervous walking into the gathering, but when she saw familiar faces, smiling kindly at her, she relaxed. Someone asked her, "What made the biggest difference for you?" 1. Maya looked at Daniel before answering. Her eyes softened. "He didn't walk away," she said simply. "He didn't ignore me. He refused to let me give up. And he helped me heal with patience and kindness." People nodded, touched by her words. Some looked at Daniel with admiration. They all knew farming was a tough life, and dealing with someone in need was even tougher. But Daniel had done it without hesitation. As the gathering went on, Maya found herself talking easily with people, sharing small pieces of her story without fear. Her voice no longer shook the way it once did. She felt seen not as someone broken, but as someone rebuilding her life. When they returned to the farm after the gathering, Maya stood on the porch and looked out across the land. She felt stronger, calmer, and more certain about her future than ever before. Daniel stepped beside her. "You did well today." "Thank you," she said. "It felt good." "It shows how far you've come," he replied. She smiled softly. "I couldn't have done it without you." He looked out at the sunset. "Maybe. But you did the hardest work. You chose to keep going." Maya took another deep breath, letting the warm air fill her lungs. Then she turned to Daniel, with a brave, steady voice. "I'm ready to live again," she said. "Truly live." Daniel nodded. "And you will." The day ended quietly, with the two of them watching the sky fade into dusk. The world that once seemed so dark to Maya now felt bright and full of possibilities. She knew her life would never be the same again, but now, that thought gave her hope instead of fear. And the truth was simple and powerful. She had asked Daniel to end her pain that day, but he saved her life instead. And that choice stunned everyone, especially her.